The Story of Chrono Trigger, Episode 1, A Journey Through Time. Most early role-playing video games feature stories of a rather standard variety. There might be some twists and turns, but generally they boil down to a group of good people triumphing over some bad ones. Chrono Trigger, on the other hand, risked doing a little bit more with the formula, with one of the key unique aspects being the involvement of time travel in the plot. Combining that with incredible visual design, music, gameplay, and characters, and it's no wonder that Chrono Trigger is often regarded as one of the greatest video games ever made. This mini-series will go over the story of the game from start to finish, with some caveats. Another unique aspect of Chrono Trigger for its time is the fact that there are a number of different endings possible, depending on the player's progression. For this playthrough, I'll be showing what is generally regarded as the canon ending to the game, and I'll also be making certain gameplay decisions in order to present the story as more of a typical narrative than a video game. The story opens in the year 1000 AD in the city of Truce. A young man, Crono, is awoken by his mother, who says that he must have been so excited about the millennial fair that he couldn't sleep last night. The fair is being held to commemorate 1000 years since the founding of the Kingdom of Guardia, and is host to a wide assortment of shops and activities. Crono plans on visiting his friend Lucca there, a renowned inventor who is showing off her latest invention. Crono's mother hands off his allowance, and he heads over to the fair. After chatting with some of the other attendees and betting on a race, Crono moves further into the fair. Here, he accidentally bumps into a young blonde girl, sending them both to the ground. When they get back up, the girl remarks that her pendant is missing. Crono quickly finds it nearby on the ground and hands it back to her. She thanks him and says that she's not from Truce, but she came here to visit the fair. She asks if he wants to walk around the fair together, and introduces herself as Marl. The two spend some time together, with Crono participating in a drinking contest, and the two returning a girl's kitten back to her. While speaking with a swordsmith named Melchior, he asks Crono if he'll try and convince Marl to sell him her pendant, but Crono refuses. Eventually, the two hear that Lucca is finished setting up her new invention, so the two progress to the back of the fairgrounds. They find Lucca along with her father, Tabin, with them showing off a set of teleportation devices capable of teleporting matter from one of the pods to the other. Lucca is glad to see Crono, as no one here is willing to try the teleporter, and she quickly convinces Crono to give it a shot. The machine hums with energy as it powers up, until it finally activates, successfully sending Crono to the other pad. Marl remarks that it looks like fun, and she wants to give it a try as well. Lucca and her father fire up the machine once again, but this time, Marl's pendant begins to glow, and the machine goes haywire. A large portal spontaneously appears, and Marl is pulled into it before it closes. Tabin quickly clears the onlookers from the scene, and Lucca surmises that there must have been more that caused it than just the teleporter. Crono finds Marl's pendant on the telepad and picks it up, with the intention of following her wherever she went. Lucca and her father activate the machine again, and once more the portal opens. Lucca wishes him good luck, and says that she'll follow him through as soon as she figures out what went wrong here. Crono gets dumped out of the portal into a very different locale, up in the mountains. Before he has a chance to catch his breath, however, he's attacked by a small group of fiends. Fortunately, Crono is somewhat capable with a sword, and fends them off. He tackles a few more fiends on his way down the mountain, and after emerging, realizes that he's still in the city of Truce, but it looks a bit different, with no millennial fair going on. Speaking with a resident, she tells him that, of course, there's no millennial fair, as their kingdom is only 600 years old, and King Guardia the 21st is on the throne instead of King Guardia the 33rd. It would seem that Crono has been sent 400 years back in time, and Marl is nowhere to be seen. Speaking with some more residents, he learns that the kingdom is currently at war with an individual referred to as the Fiend Lord, and the king's soldiers recently found the queen wandering in the canyon after being missing for quite a while. Crono decides to head up to Guardia Castle after checking the whole town for Marl. Arriving at the castle, Crono is accosted by the guards at the front, until the queen shows up and orders them to stop. The queen turns out to shockingly resemble Marl, and says that Crono is a friend of hers. She then walks off, and Crono briefly speaks with the king, who remarks that his wife has been acting a little strangely since she was rescued. Crono heads upstairs to speak privately with the queen, who reveals that she is, in fact, Marl, but everyone keeps calling her Leene for some reason. She says that she somehow knew he would come after her, but she suddenly starts crying out in pain before vanishing entirely. Crono, bewildered, heads back downstairs, where he bumps into Lucca, and he informs her of what happened. Lucca is far less confused by the situation than Crono, however, and she explains what's happened. Marl has been mistaken for her own ancestor, as she is actually Princess Nadia of their time period. Queen Leene was kidnapped in this time period, and someone was supposed to have gone and rescued her, but their presence here has changed history. Marl was dumped off in the mountains nearby, where she was found by the soldiers, who then called off the search before they found the actual queen. This change will apparently lead to the real queen being killed, creating a paradox that will erase her descendants, including Marl. In order to preserve the flow of history, Crono and Lucca will have to find the real queen. The two leave the castle and continue to explore the surrounding region. With the bridge to the southern island in disarray thanks to the Fiend Lord's army, their last stop is a large cathedral in the woods. The nuns inside of the cathedral seem to be a little odd, but there's no sign of the queen. Just before departing, however, they spot something on the ground, which turns out to be a hairpin bearing the Guardia Royal crest. Upon this discovery, the nuns reveal themselves to be fiends in disguise and attack the two. They fend off the group, but as one more appears and lunges at Lucca, she's saved by the sudden appearance of a small humanoid frog wielding a sword. The creature speaks eloquently, however, and asks if they'll accompany him further into this lair to rescue the queen. Lucca exclaims that she can't stand frogs, and the creature says that they can do as they please, but he must save the queen. Lucca hesitantly changes her mind, and the two agree to accompany him further inside. The creature introduces himself simply as Frog, and says that there must be a hidden doorway here. They end up finding it, triggered by the cathedral's organ, and proceed into the fiend-filled lair. Along the way, they find an entire shrine devoted to the Fiend Lord, an individual apparently named Magus. Finally, in the back of the cathedral, they find Queen Leene being held captive by Guardia's Chancellor. The Chancellor decides that this charade has gone on long enough, and he proceeds to transform into a large monster, calling himself Yakra. A fierce battle ensues, but with Frog's capable assistance, they defeat Yakra. Frog thanks the two for their help in saving the queen, and they find the real Chancellor tied up in one of the chests nearby. The group returns to the castle, where the king curiously doesn't question who exactly the girl was that they found originally. The Chancellor, meanwhile, states that they'll have to institute a stricter criminal justice system in Guardia to ensure that no one threatens the royal family ever again. Frog, however, laments that he failed to protect the queen and departs the castle. Crono and Lucca return to where Marl disappeared, where she just as suddenly reappears, wondering what happened. She says that she couldn't feel or see anything, but she knows she was someplace cold, and wonders if that's what it's like to die. She proceeds to confess that she is indeed a member of the royal family, but she lied in order to be treated like normal. With the real queen of this period safe and sound, and Marl back in one piece, the three return to the mountain where they first arrived. Lucca reveals that these portals, which she calls gates, are unstable, appearing and disappearing all the time. Utilizing the same principles as her telepod device, however, she's developed a handheld piece of technology she calls a gate key, which locks the gate in place, allowing them to utilize it at will. The three head through the gate, ending back at the Millennial Fair in 1000 AD. Lucca plans on investigating further on why exactly the gate appeared in the first place, and tells Crono to escort Marl back to the castle. Upon entry, however, they're stopped by the Chancellor, who orders Crono to be arrested for kidnapping a member of the royal family. Despite Marl's protests to the contrary, Crono is knocked out and immediately taken into court. Crono's appointed lawyer, Pierre, argues that it was the princess herself who asked Crono if she could join him, which is corroborated by Crono. The Chancellor, however, counters that witnesses report that it was Crono who bumped into Marl at the fair, and shortly after, the two disappeared. A character witness is brought in to testify, revealed to be the young girl whose kitten was rescued by Crono. Pierre then argues that Crono had no motive for kidnapping the princess, but the Chancellor argues that he was strongly motivated by greed, a fact Crono vehemently denies. Eventually, the jurors are brought in one by one to decide whether Crono is guilty or not. In the end, 6 of the 7 jurors proclaim Crono to be not guilty, and Crono is sentenced to 3 days of solitary confinement for aiding in the princess's flight from the castle. Marl bursts into protest, followed by King Guardia, who tells her to leave the rest to the Chancellor and to forget about her little escapade in town. Crono is escorted to the prison, where the Chancellor informs the warden that he is a seditionist who planned on overthrowing the kingdom. He lies that Crono has been found guilty and is to be executed in 3 days. The warden dares not to question the order, and Crono is tossed into a cell to wait. Rather than waiting for his own execution, however, Crono begins making a racket on his cell bars, eventually angering one of his guards enough to enter the cell and knock him to the floor. When his back is turned, however, Crono manages to knock him out, before taking care of the other guard. With his equipment back, Crono continues to move through the prison, eventually ending up back at the entrance, where he finds the warden, who swiftly flees. He's knocked out, however, by none other than Lucca, who came to rescue Crono. As they move across the bridge back to the castle proper, they're stopped by the Chancellor standing behind a large tank in the shape of a dragon. The tank is a marvel of engineering, but it proves to be no match for the two, with Crono finishing it off by slashing across its back, resulting in an explosion. The two are quickly accosted by more guards when they reach the castle, but the guards are ordered to stand down by Marl. The king arrives and tells Marl that she is a princess and she has responsibilities, with her little excursions seeming to be a bad influence on her. Marl yells that she can't stand to live here anymore and flees the castle with Crono and Lucca. The three are chased into the nearby woods by the guards until they come across another gate. Marl is enthusiastic about jumping into it, although Lucca argues that they have no idea where or when they'll end up, and they might not be able to come back. In the end, Crono agrees with Marl, and they hop into the gate, much to the Chancellor's confusion. On the other end of the gate, the three find themselves in a stark but futuristic-looking building, and upon emerging, discover that they now find themselves in what appears to be a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Nearby is a large dome structure, where they find people living inside, although they look like they're not long for this world. Most of the inhabitants mention food, as there isn't any here, and they've never heard of Truce or Guardia. With no other options, the three traverse the monster-filled ruins of a large city, coming out on the other side to find another large dome. When they tell the inhabitants that they just traveled across the ruins, they all perk up in astonishment. An elderly man there, Doen, tells them that the substructure of this dome contains both a supercomputer and a food storage facility, but they're being guarded by security robots that won't let anyone through. The group immediately begins to descend into the structure, and upon approach to the food storage area, they are ambushed by a large robot. The creation puts up quite the fight, but with the three of them working together, they soon destroy it. Unfortunately, all of the food in the storage has rotted, with Lucca surmising that the refrigeration failed at some point. They also find a human corpse here, one of the residents that must have made it down here but couldn't make it back out. Clutched in his hand is a single seed, which the group takes. Using a code they find to access a separate branch of the structure, they find the supercomputer, which Lucca uses to locate another gate. She finds one to the east, past another ruined city. Marl then presses a large button on the terminal, which brings up a visual record titled as The Day of Lavos, from the year 1999 AD. The video shows a massive alien creature emerging from underground and proceeding to launch quills across the world, devastating everything and bringing about the apocalypse. This is their future, set to occur 999 years from their present time. Marl, however, exclaims that they can change history, just like they did in 600 AD. Lucca isn't quite so enthusiastic about their chances, but agrees that it is possible, and Crono agrees as well. For now, however, they have to get back to their own time period. Upon returning topside, the inhabitants swarm around them in shock that they made it back alive. They tell them that the only thing they found down there was a seed, which might be their only hope of staying alive. Doen says that he doesn't know what kind of seed this is, but he's encouraged by the group's optimism, and he'll do his best to grow it. He then hands them a key to a jet bike parked at the nearby ruins, telling them that hopefully it still works and can get them across in a hurry. As it turns out, it does work, but before the group can hop into the sleek vehicle, they're stopped by an individual with wheels attached to his back, calling himself Johnny, alongside some robotic minions. Johnny says that he'll let them use that jet bike to get across the ruins, but only if they agree to race him. With the only alternative being to slog it across the ruins on foot, the group agrees. The race is neck and neck up until the finish line, but Crono manages to pull ahead at the last moment and clinch the win. Johnny is surprised but pleased, and the three continue on to the Eastern Dome. They don't find a gate, but instead find a broken down humanoid robot, which immediately intrigues Lucca, who claims that she can likely fix it. After working on it for some time, she activates the robot, who turns out to be exceedingly polite and asks them what their command is. Lucca and Marl convince him to drop the formalities and ask him his name. He doesn't have one, instead offering his serial number of R-66Y. While Lucca finds this cool, Marl and Crono instead give him the name of Robo. Robo apparently was deactivated during the apocalypse, so he doesn't have any memories of it. The gate the group is looking for is likely behind a sealed door here, but Robo says that they'll need to reactivate the power from the nearby factory in order to open it. Robo will accompany them in order to bypass the security measures, but one of them needs to stay behind to open the door during the brief window the power is on. Sensing that Lucca's technical ability might come in handy, Marl stays behind. Despite Robo being able to bypass security in order to get them through the factory, it's still loaded with hostile robots and other monsters. Eventually, the group manages to access the emergency generator, but activating it causes the security system to go haywire. During their flight from the facility, they're stopped by a group of 6 robots, similar in appearance to Robo. Robo says that they are his friends, but one of them knocks Robo back and claims that he is defective. Their assigned task, including Robo's, was to eliminate all intruders, and since Robo is ignoring that task, he must be destroyed. The 6 robots begin thrashing Robo mercilessly, tossing him aside before turning to Crono and Lucca. A battle ensues, and while the odds are stacked against the two, they manage to prevail. They proceed to drag the damaged remains of Robo back to the dome, where Lucca begins spending a great deal of time repairing him. While fixing him, they explain to Robo what their goal is, and Lucca asks Robo what he wants to do after he's repaired. The question confuses him, as no one's ever asked him before. After finishing the repairs, Robo says that he has an answer, and tells the group that he wants to go with them. There's nothing left for him here, and together they might be able to give the life on this planet a chance. The group welcomes him with open arms, and the 4 of them proceed through the gate in the back room. They end up in a very strange locale, a platform seemingly floating in an abyss. They find an old man standing against a street lamp, who refers to them as drifters. He informs them that they are now located at the end of time, and travelers lost in time's flow turn up here, like driftwood on a beach. Whenever 4 or more entities of varying origins enter a temporal rift together, the torsion exerted on time's flow pushes them to the point of least resistance. Here. This has apparently been happening more often lately, and he fears that something is having a powerful effect on the very fabric of time. Someone is going to have to stay here then, to avoid any more complications, a concept that doesn't greatly appeal to Marl. The old man admits that it is a bleak place, but there are gates here connected to any time period they'd like to visit. The group decides to leave Robo here for now, who's already accustomed to isolation, and won't completely fit in back in 1000 AD. As the group heads over to use the gate back to 1000 AD, the old man stops them, telling them to check out the room behind him. When they do, they find an odd little furry creature, calling itself Specchio, the Master of War. He says that a long time before they were born, there was a kingdom where magic flourished and everyone could use it. The people there abused their powers, however, and ended up destroying their kingdom. After that, there wasn't anyone left who could use magic, aside from fiends. Specchio says that they have the inner strength necessary to fuel magic, however, with Crono possessing the power of light, Marl the power of water, and Lucca the power of fire. Specchio tells them to walk around the room 3 times while chanting, "I want to use magic," over and over in their heads. While this sounds completely ridiculous, they humor the creature, performing the task. Afterwards, Specchio congratulates them and proceeds to activate their magic power, allowing all 3 of them to use magic. He then offers to let them test their magic out on him, and although it's true that they can now use magic, Specchio still manages to trounce them. Fortified with their new abilities, the 3 head through the gate back to 1000 AD, but they end up in a new location, falling out of a wardrobe in a house owned by a couple of fiends. The fiends turn out to be not exactly friendly, but not hostile either, and they get over the initial shock to explain to the group that they are now in Medina village, which was founded by fiends 400 years ago after they lost a war against humankind. Medina is on a separate island entirely from Truce, with no ferries running here, and most of the fiends here hold a grudge against humans. They do mention an odd old human who lives near a cave in the mountains to the west that may be able to help them out. The group pokes around the village, meeting the mayor, Ozzie VIII, whose ancestor fought alongside the Fiend Lord himself, and wonders aloud why Magus didn't exterminate the human race when he had the chance. On that note, the group decides to leave Medina and check out the old man's house. The old man turns out to be Melchior the swordsmith from the fair, and despite his extensive collection of weapons for sale, he isn't able to help them get back to Truce. Instead, they check out the cave nearby, finding it filled with hostile fiends. At the end of the cave, they fight a large fiend known as Hekron, providing them a perfect opportunity to test out their new magical abilities. Before dying, Hekron cries out and mentions that Magus is responsible for summoning Lavos 400 years ago. What exactly happened in relation to that summoning and why Lavos took nearly 1400 years to destroy the world is unknown, but the group decides to head back to 600 AD to investigate further. They find a whirlpool in the back of the cave that dumps them out back near Truce. They stop in at Lucca's home, where her father gives her some new equipment that he's made, and they say hi to her mother, who became disabled after an accident with some machinery a number of years ago. They then stop into Crono's house, where his mother exclaims her relief at seeing Crono alive, since she had heard that he was going to be executed. After petting his cat and deciding it's best not to stop back at Guardia Castle, the group takes the gate at the back of the fair and heads back to the Middle Ages. Speaking with some of the locals in Truce, they learn that King Guardia has been wounded during the ongoing war against the Fiend Lord, but the hero of legend has arrived to defeat him. The 2 armies are battling it out on the bridge leading to the southern island, but they're running low on supplies. The group heads up to Guardia Castle, where they meet with the king, recovering in bed. Sir Cyrus, their greatest knight, is nowhere to be found, so instead their hopes rest on the shoulders of the boy wearing the hero's badge. The boy has gone to the southern island in order to find the sword that can slay Magus. It seems like the group needs to get across that bridge, so they retrieve some fresh supplies from the castle's kitchens and deliver it to the soldiers at the bridge. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like enough for the soldiers to stave off the onslaught, so Crono, Marl, and Lucca step in to assist. Moving across the bridge, they find Ozzie, one of Magus's 3 generals, who is raising the dead soldiers as undead monsters. The group continues to assail Ozzie across the bridge, causing the undead soldiers to return to rest until they reach the other side. Here, Ozzie combines a number of undead into a single large monstrosity named Zombor. Despite Zombor's unique defenses, the group makes short work of him and continues south to the village of Dorino. Here they learn that the legendary sword, Masamune, rests within the nearby Denadoro Mountains, where it's guarded by a terrible beast. In the town of Pore, they overhear that a strange frogman came into the tavern, mumbling about Queen Leene and the Masamune, and the legendary hero is actually a young boy from this village named Tata. Before heading up the mountains to seek out Tata, they roam through the nearby forest and find an underground hovel, which turns out to be Frog's home. Frog is shocked to learn that the king has been wounded, but refuses to join them, saying that he is no hero and there's nothing he can do. It's unfortunate, but if Tata truly is the legendary hero that can wield Masamune, he might be all they need. The Denadoro Mountains turn out to be filled with monsters, and shortly upon approach, they find a young boy fleeing for his life. Hoping that that isn't Tata, they continue upwards, eventually reaching the peak. Here, in a cave, they find a sword embedded into the ground, along with two kids. The kids turn out to be named Masa and Mune, and they decide to test the group to see if they're worthy of wielding the sword. They reveal their true forms, much more bestial in appearance, and a fight ensues, although the two don't prove to be much of a challenge. Eventually they stop, and conclude that no one has lasted this long since Cyrus, so they decide to start fighting for real. They merge together into one large monster, and it seems that they weren't kidding, as their combined form puts up a much more difficult fight. Combining Marl and Lucca's elemental powers with Crono's swordplay, however, turns out to be enough to win the day, and the two revert back to their human forms. They remark on how much fun that was, and then wonder if the group will fix them and find their proper owner. They proceed to merge with the sword in the ground, becoming the proper Masamune, which turns out to be only a broken half of a sword. Returning back to Pore, they find the boy, Tata, who admits that he picked up the hero's badge on the floor of the tavern after a froggish fellow dropped it. He originally was going to sell it, but after everyone started calling him a hero, he went along with it. He's had enough of this hero business, however, and hands them the badge. The group returns to Frog, showing him the badge, and although he's happy to see it, he says that he can't do anything against a Magus without the Masamune, and even if he had it, he has no right to wield it. In a container in his home, they find the other broken half of the sword, and upon closer inspection, they see an engraving on it in archaic letters, which Lucca makes out to read as Melchior. How exactly a man who lives 400 years from now created the sword is a perplexing question, one they want answered as quickly as possible. Using the time gates, they return to 1000 AD and enter Melchior's home. Shocked at the sight of the Masamune, he admits that it's a very long story as to why his name is on it. He could reforge it, but not without some Dreamstone, which is what the sword is made of. Dreamstone can no longer be found, however, as it was a glittering red stone once valued more than gold, in a time long before they could even imagine. Time is becoming less of a concern for the group, however, and sure enough, the end of time features a gate that takes the group far, far back in time, all the way back to 65 million BC. Unfortunately, the other end of the gate opens up in mid-air up in the mountains, and upon landing, the group is attacked by a horde of scaly, humanoid reptiles. Although they defeat a number of them, there's more than they can handle, and things look dire until a stranger appears to help out. The stranger turns out to be a fit, blonde girl wearing some skimpy furs, who fights off the creatures using only her hands and feet. Afterwards, the girl pins Crono up against a wall, asks for his name, and introduces herself as Isla. She states that she likes strong men, so she likes Crono, and then states that Marl and Lucca are also strong, and she likes both strong men and women, embarrassing the two. She then asks where they came from, to which Lucca responds that they are from way after the day after tomorrow, prompting only laughter from Isla. She invites the group back to her village for eating and dancing, and after Lucca asks after Dreamstone, Isla states that there are stones everywhere, and she'll give them many stones. With no other clear leads, the group decides to follow after to her village, Ioka, at which point a party is held in their honor. Isla tells Crono that the creatures they fought off are known as reptites, led by an individual named Azala, whom Isla states is very smart. Everyone in Ioka village fights the reptites, and those that don't go off to another village named Laruba. Azala plans on wiping out all of the humans, but Isla won't go down without a fight. After dancing with Marl and drinking a local beverage called Skull Smash with Lucca, Crono speaks again with Isla, who shows him a large red rock. She explains that the person who holds this rock is a strong person, and since Isla is the strongest in the village, it's her rock. If Crono wants it, he'll have to earn it by winning a drinking competition. Isla and Crono compete to see who can drink more Skull Smash, with Crono emerging the victor and winning the Dreamstone. The night passes by, and just as it seems that they'll be able to head back to Melchior with their prize, Lucca discovers that the gate key is missing. Without the key, they'll be stranded here forever, so they go find Isla in her hut to see if she knows anything. She immediately suspects the reptites, and agrees to help check out their lair to find it. Crono decides to have Robo join the two of them, and they head south of the village to a large forest, where they find Kino, a member of the village that's close with Isla. After some pressure from Isla, he quickly admits to stealing the key due to being jealous of her attention towards Crono. Kino apologizes to both Isla and Crono, but reveals that he doesn't have the key anymore, as the reptites took it from him. Isla sends Kino back to Ioka, as the three of them continue through the forest, eventually arriving at the cavernous reptite lair. After navigating through the caves and fighting off a bunch of both reptites and other beasts, the group comes across Azala, the queen of the reptites, who speaks quite eloquently and refers to the group as apes. Azala asks them what the purpose of the gate key is, but Crono declines to tell her, prompting Azala to bring out a muscular, bipedal dragon creature named Nizbil. The group is forced into a battle against Nizbil, with Crono having to use his ability to cast light magic to weaken Nizbil's defenses, allowing Robo and Isla to pummel him. Eventually, they beat the creature down, and Azala admits defeat, for now, handing back the gate key while exclaiming that the reptites are the true rulers of this world. Back in Ioka, Isla is sad that the group is leaving, and hopes they return at some point. With the gate key in hand, they return to the gate up in the mountains, heading back to the end of time, followed by 1000 AD. Returning to Melchior, he's quite perplexed on how they managed to find both the Masamune and some Dreamstone, but agrees to mend the sword, with Lucca's assistance. After some amount of work, they reveal the repaired Masamune in all its glory. The group takes it back to Frog in 600 AD, who is shocked by its appearance and states that he needs some time to ponder this turn of events. During the night, he thinks about Sir Cyrus, the great knight of Guardia, who went off on a quest to reclaim the hero badge from a creature known as the Frog King, alongside his loyal squire, Glenn. Cyrus easily bested the Frog King, and with the hero badge in hand, he also eventually claimed the Masamune as well. Sometime later, Cyrus and Glenn faced off against Magus himself, who shattered the Masamune and easily struck down Cyrus. Cyrus asked Glenn to look after Queen Leene before his body burst into flames. Glenn stared down Magus in anger, but was ultimately defenseless, prompting Magus to cast a spell on him and transform him into a humanoid frog. Frog states that this was 10 years ago, and tells the group that he doesn't know how far his skills will carry him, but he will put them to the test. Crono, Frog, and Marl approach a sheer cliff wall near the Denadoro Mountains, where supposedly a path to Magus's castle lies. Upon approach, Frog reminisces about when he was a child, being bullied by others, only to be saved by Cyrus. Cyrus tells him that there are times when a man must stand and face the things that trouble him. Glenn says that he can't bring himself to hurt another person, to which Cyrus responds that he's too soft. Later in life, Cyrus tells Glenn that he's decided to join the knighthood and asks Glenn to join him, as he's better with the sword than Cyrus. Glenn says that he hasn't the nerve that it takes to be a knight, and he'd freeze up in a real battle. After being turned into a frog by Magus, he recovered the hero's badge that had fallen from Cyrus's corpse. Back in the present, Frog takes the Masamune and states that his name is Glenn. Long has he carried Cyrus's hopes and dreams, and now he bears the Masamune as well. Henceforth he claims them as his own, and he shall slay the Fiend Lord and restore their honor. Frog proceeds to lift the sword into the air, sending a beam of rippling energy into the sky that pierces the clouds. He then swings the Masamune down in front of him, which splits the cliff in twain, revealing a cave entrance. The group proceeds to enter the cave, with the other end turning out to be another island entirely, where Magus's castle is located. The castle is dark and ominous, with a foreboding air to it, but they enter nonetheless. Curiously, as they roam the grim halls of the keep, they are not accosted at all by monsters, only by the dark atmosphere. After exploring as much as they can, however, Ozzie reveals himself, greeting Frog and taunting him. Ozzie states that Lord Magus is busy right now, and they'll have to deal with his 3 generals first. The Master Swordsman, Slash, the Magician, Flea, and Ozzie himself, along with all of the beasts in the keep. Now, the monsters make themselves known, and a brutal gauntlet ensues as the group continues back through the halls of the castle in search for the generals. They eventually come across the swordsman, Slash, who is surprised that Frog found the courage to come here. A fight begins, with Slash proving to be quite the swordsman indeed, lashing out with furious strikes. Unfortunately for him, however, he's at a disadvantage with 3 against 1, and he is eventually beaten. The group continues on, battling more and more of Magus's minions, until finally coming across the second of the generals, Flea. Despite his ladylike appearance, he is capable of some impressive magic, including the ability to turn others against their allies. Again, the numerical advantage is in the group's favor, and before long, Flea goes down as well. They battle back to where they first encountered Ozzie, finding a portal that takes them further into the castle. After defeating more minions, they encounter Ozzie again, and after he realizes that they've beaten both Slash and Flea, he runs deeper into the castle. Ozzie proceeds to force the group through a number of trapped rooms, but the traps prove to be inconveniences at best, and before long, Ozzie runs out of room to flee. He states that Magus should have finished summoning Lavos by now, and then puts an invincible barrier around himself. Rather than trying to fight through it, the group instead activates one of Ozzie's own traps, sending him plummeting below. With all 3 generals down, the path is clear to Magus himself. In the deepest recesses of the castle, they enter into his dark, ritual chamber, lit by a series of candles. As they rush in, they hear Magus reciting an incantation, offering up the life of this world in order to summon Lavos. Frog approaches the Fiend Lord with the Masamune in hand, and Magus remembers him as well as the Masamune. He states that he hopes no one else interferes this time, and says that, again, the bitter black winds begin to howl. He's not much for conversation, however, and the battle begins, with Crono, Frog, and Marl facing off against perhaps one of the greatest sorcerers to ever live. Magus completely lives up to his reputation, effortlessly throwing out powerful magical spells of multiple different elements, demonstrating a mastery over all magical arts. It's a desperate battle for survival as the 3 throw both sword and spell at the warlock, barely staying alive against his onslaught. The Masamune proves to be invaluable, absorbing some of Magus's dark energy and weakening him. As the fight goes on, Magus begins to lower his guard as he casts his most powerful spell, Dark Matter, and the group frantically tries to put him down before they fall under the relentless tide of dark magic. Eventually, surprising both Magus and likely themselves, they best the Fiend Lord in combat. They then hear a great sound in the distance, which they presume to be Lavos, and they prepare themselves for an even worse fight. Magus cries out that Lavos mustn't awaken from his slumber yet, which confuses the group, as they assume that Magus just created Lavos with his ritual. Magus calls them fools, however, and reveals that he merely summoned it, as Lavos has dwelt within the earth for eons, absorbing the land's energy and growing ever stronger. A massive gate appears and sucks the group into it, with Magus exclaiming in anger about them interfering. What exactly they did by interfering is unclear, but what is clear is that Lavos is much older than they first thought, and eliminating Magus would in no way eliminate Lavos. This means that their journey through time is far from over, as now they not only have to figure out what exactly Lavos is, but how to defeat it before it destroys their future. They've come far, and have grown much stronger than when they started, but there's no way they're prepared for a world-ending threat like that. Time will tell if they ever will be. The story of Chrono Trigger. Episode 2, Lavos Beckons. As is usual for a classic role-playing game, the world is in danger from a great threat. Unlike normal, however, the threat is not in the present, but rather the future. An intrepid group of heroes, however, discover that they have access to time travel, and while visiting the far-flung future, they find it devastated. Accessing a supercomputer here, they find out that in the year 1999, nearly a millennia from their present, a creature known as Lavos emerged from underground and ravaged the world. The group meets up with some other brave individuals, and eventually they learn that Magus, a powerful sorcerer, apparently summoned Lavos in 600 AD. After going through great lengths and fighting countless fiends, they face off against Magus and defeat him. Unfortunately, rather than saving their future, they learn that Magus was merely awakening Lavos, meaning that the creature had already been here for who knows how long, and their future is still sealed unless they find a way to defeat Lavos itself. When we last left off then, Crono, Marl, and Frog were being taken through a large time gate while Magus chastised them for their interference. Crono wakes to a voice calling his name, which is revealed to be Marl, and he's back in his own house. Marl tells him he'll be late for work, and he needs to hold down a job as they can't keep asking her father for help. Unfortunately for Crono, however, this is only a dream, and he actually wakes up in Isla's tent back in 65 million BC, along with Marl and Frog. Apparently, Isla found them unconscious up in the mountains and took them back here. She asks if the large frog is a present for her to eat, but Frog exclaims for her to perish the thought, and asks if she also found a pale-faced man wearing a cape. She did not, which presumably means that he woke up first and fled. Isla has bigger problems to face, however, as she has escalated the war against the Reptites, and in retaliation they burned down Laruba village and kidnapped Geno, her second in command. The elder of Laruba village is angry with Isla and has no wish to fight the Reptites, which leads Isla to calling him dead inside, as they must fight to live. She wants to borrow the dactyls, flying mounts that she plans on using to travel to the Reptite castle up in the mountains, known as the Tyranno lair. The elder believes this to be a suicide trip, but acquiesces and lends Isla the dactyls. The group isn't about to just let Isla go off on her own, despite the dangers involved for their future, and they head up to the dactyl nest after her. Once again, Crono decides to take Robo along, since he worked well with Isla before against the Reptites. The three fly off on the dactyls towards the imposing Reptite castle, not noticing a distant red light in the sky. Arriving at the Tyranno lair, the group is immediately assailed by a host of creatures, both Reptites and other beasts that the Reptites have under their control. Before long, however, down in the prison area, they find Geno locked in a cell, seemingly intended to be a feast for the Reptites. Isla breaks Geno out, but when he insists on going with her to help beat the Reptites, she refuses, because if she dies, Geno needs to lead the tribe. Geno departs, and the three continue through the castle, eventually encountering what initially seems to be Nizbel once again, but is actually Nizbel's more powerful twin. The fight plays out in a similar fashion to the first, with the same strategy being applied, and before long, Nizbel II is also defeated. In the throne room of the castle, they find Azala, who says that this will be the final confrontation between humans and Reptites. Whoever wins will inherit the Earth. Azala heads out the back door, and the group follows, finding her perched on top of a massive dinosaur. Azala screeches at the red star in the sky to fall, asking it to stain the earth red. The group begins a battle against both Azala and the Tyranno, with Azala displaying telekinetic powers and the Tyranno displaying the ability to breathe fire. The three defeat the weaker of the two first, Azala, before facing off against the dinosaur. The fight is vicious, and it takes a great deal of effort to bring down the beast, but the group emerges victorious, ending the Reptite's reign of terror against humanity. Azala is perplexed by this turn of events, but tells them to let it be known that the Reptites fought proudly to the bitter end. Suddenly, there's a flash of red light, and Azala says that first, a great fiery stone will crash to the earth, its flames spreading to scorch every corner of the land. Then the chill will begin to creep across the blackened plains, ushering in a long, cruel age of ice and snow, a fitting end to this age. This concept is familiar to Isla, and she says that the large stone is known among her people as Lavos, with La meaning fire and Vos meaning big. Kino suddenly arrives with the dactyls, and although Isla tries to get Azala to come with them, she refuses, claiming that this is the will of the earth. As they depart, Azala bids them to take care of this world. As soon as they fly away, Lavos crash lands into the Tyranno lair, devastating the area and leaving behind only a massive crater. Once the smoke clears, the group approaches the crater, with the assumption that Lavos is currently in a weakened state. They don't find Lavos, however, as it must have immediately burrowed deep into the earth. Instead, they find a time gate, which Robo surmises are the result of the energy radiating from Lavos, placing strains on the surrounding time-space. Hoping that the gate will take them straight to Lavos to finish it off in this weakened state, the three jump into it. Unfortunately, it doesn't, with them instead emerging in an entirely different time period. Robo's time gyro reads it as 12,000 BC, much closer to the present, but still in the distant past. It seems that Azala was right, and the world was gripped in an age of ice and snow for a very long time, as the group steps out of the cave into a cold and harsh landscape. While wandering, however, they find something very curious, a futuristic-looking structure with a platform in the center. They proceed to step onto the platform, which lifts them into the sky, ending up on a lush, floating island. Nearby, they enter into a building housing a number of individuals surrounded by shelves and shelves of books. One of the individuals, who's clearly not human, tells the group that this is the magic kingdom of Zeal, where dreams can be made reality. The group recalls Specchio's tale of a great kingdom from many years ago that wielded magic easily before bringing about their own downfall. The kingdom is ruled by a queen, also named Zeal, who encouraged the development of the kingdom's magical prowess after the death of the king. They come across a young boy with a cat, who only says, "The black winds howl," echoing the words of Magus, along with telling the group that one among them will shortly perish. This perplexes and unnerves them, but they continue on. The people of this kingdom seem highly content as they live out luxurious lives, many of them spending a great deal of time sleeping in order to study dreams further. The three continue on to another platform outside, which proceeds to transport them back down to the cold ground level of the world. A short ways away, they take yet another platform back up, this time arriving on the large, central floating island of Zeal. Here they enter the magic city of Kajar, where many of the people study magic to further advance the civilization. They learn that the young boy they encountered is apparently Janus, the queen's son. Queen Zeal possesses a great deal of magical power, and her daughter, Shala, is also quite powerful, but so far Janus has yet to demonstrate even the slightest magical ability. The group also learns that those without magical abilities, called Earthbound ones, are cast aside and left to live in the cold wasteland down below. The group continues up the mountains on the floating island to reach the top, where the Queen's palace lies. Here they learn of some other recent developments. It seems that a mysterious individual showed up not long ago, and quickly earned the Queen's trust by making a series of uncannily accurate predictions. As part of this trust, the Queen removed her second-in-command, Lord Dalton, from overseeing the production of an ocean palace beneath the sea, placing the mysterious prophet in charge instead. The locals claim that this ocean palace will lead the kingdom to everlasting glory, although the specifics of how are not said, other than that some powerful energy source rests beneath it. They also hear about something called the Mammon Machine, with one scholar stating that you can feel the glorious energy of Lavos surging from it. It seems clear now what the powerful energy source is, as Zeal is taking energy from Lavos to power her kingdom, which is certainly a recipe for disaster. The three are allowed to observe the Mammon Machine, and learn that it was constructed by three individuals: the Guru of Reason, Balthazar, the Guru of Time, Gaspar, and the Guru of Life, Melchior. Melchior apparently opposed the Queen's plans in regards to Lavos, and disappeared shortly after, along with the other two gurus. They see Lady Shala proceed through a door in the back of the palace, identical to the one they saw in 2300 AD, opening it by presenting her pendant in front of it. One of the attendants mentions that when Lady Shala communes with the Mammon Machine, her pendant glows with a strange light, and remarks that Marl's pendant looks identical to Shala's. There aren't many coincidences when dealing with time travel, so they take the pendant to the machine and, sure enough, it also glows. It then allows them to open the same door and proceed into the Queen's throne room. Immediately upon entering, a man in a robe tells the Queen that these are the bringers of disaster of whom he spoke, at which point she commands Dalton to seize the group. He summons a large monster named Golem to deal with them, but it will take more than that to take down the heroes. Unfortunately, Dalton has a bit more than that, casting a spell that restricts their movements. They're locked away in some sort of levitating prison cell, with the Queen promising to extensively torture them. While contained, however, they are approached by Shala and Janus, with Shala intending to help them escape, while Janus calls them idiots and thinks it isn't worth the trouble. Shala isn't worried about getting caught, however, and hopes that the three might be able to rescue Melchior. She releases them from the prison and asks them to rescue Melchior, who was sent to the Mountain of Woe for opposing Zeal's plan. The mysterious prophet suddenly shows up, however, and says that he'll have to end their lives here to stop their meddling. Shala, of course, begs him not to, but surprisingly, Janus also tells him not to, at which point he relents. Instead, he has the three show him the gate that brought them here, and commands Shala to seal it shut after they go back through it. Shala's left with no choice, and the group goes along with it, going back through the gate as Shala seals it. They end up back in the prehistoric past, wondering why the prophet agreed to let them live. Marl, however, remarks that she remembers seeing doors like the one Shala's pendant opened in the future. They head back to the end of time and speak with the old man there, who says that they'll likely need some way to move through time more freely if they want to return to Zeal. He recalls someone working on a device that would help. The Wings of Time, he called it. But he fears that the man's mind left him in the course of his long years of research. Crono and Lucca enlist Robo to go with them back to the future, with their destination being an island to the south that they haven't explored yet. To get there, they travel through an underground sewer system, crawling with some nasties, but nothing they can't handle. Emerging onto the other island, they enter another dome, finding a sealed door. Opening it with their pendant, they find a hallway with a series of notes left behind by none other than Balthazar, the Guru of Reason. He states that he was cast into this era by a great disaster, and here he learned that Lavos fell to this planet ages ago, where he began feeding on the Earth's energy. Lavos' form was revealed briefly when he was summoned by Magus in the year 600, but it wouldn't appear fully until 1999. Afterwards, Lavos took to the nearby mountain, Death Peak, making it his throne, or his nest, as his spawn litter the mountainside. Balthazar spent his years here studying Lavos, but he recognized that his sanity was slipping away, and so before his mind was lost forever, he wrote these notes. He leaves behind his greatest invention, something that will let them take hold of the reins of time. In the back room of the complex, they find his Wings of Time, a sleek-looking machine. The three climb into the machine, which they dub Epoch, and activate it, which causes it to generate an unprecedented amount of power. Epoch takes the crew to the end of time, where the old man is surprised to see it, and suggests they take it back to 12,000 BC. Crono, Lucca, and Frog do just that, landing back on the island where they first arrived. It seems that the elevator up to Zeal is also sealed off to them, so instead they head into a nearby cave system, where they find a village of Earthbound ones. They learn that many of the Earthbound ones were taken away to build the Ocean Palace, and none of them have ever been seen again. The village elder tells them that apparently Melchior, the Guru of Life, said that Janus has even more magical power in him than Shala, but he now hides and denies the power due to his mother's insanity. Connected to the caves is a massive chain leading upwards to a floating mountain, the Mountain of Woe. Recalling that Melchior is imprisoned there and is likely someone they want freed, the group makes their way up. The Mountain of Woe is a chilly, foggy place, of course filled with monsters, but the group eventually fights their way through to the peak. Here they find a large block of ice, presumably imprisoning Melchior, but unfortunately it's guarded by a massive creature that attacks them. The fight is difficult, to say the least, in no small part due to the creature being able to regenerate parts of its body that they destroy. They persevere, though, and slay the creature, freeing Melchior in the process. Of course, the Melchior here is the same Melchior they're already familiar with, although this one doesn't know them yet. They inform him of the current events going on in Zeal, and he surmises that Lavos is overtaking the Queen's soul due to how much energy she's siphoning off of it. Their conversation is cut short, however, as apparently killing the creature here broke the magic seal that was keeping the mountain afloat. They flee back to the Earthbound village as the mountain crashes into the ocean. Melchior tells them that they need to put a stop to the Mammon machine before it wakes Lavos. Suddenly, Shala and Janus arrive, informing them that the Ocean Palace has been completed. Fortunately, Zeal needs Shala to activate the Mammon machine, and she refuses to do so again. Unfortunately, however, Dalton arrives and forces Shala to come to the Ocean Palace with him. As the group draws their weapons to deal with him, he holds Shala hostage, stating that he doesn't fear the Queen and will kill Shala if necessary. Although that's likely not true, the group stands down and prepares to storm the Ocean Palace to put an end to things. Melchior hands them a red knife, made from the same red stone as the Mammon machine, capable of destroying the machine for good. Thanks to Shala, the elevators back to Zeal are working for them again, and they make their way back to the palace. They find Dalton sitting on the throne, complaining about being ordered to guard this place while the Prophet is allowed to go down to the Ocean Palace. The three battle Dalton, who proves to have a bit more bark than bite. He creates a portal down to the Ocean Palace and flees, prompting the group to follow straight after him. They begin moving through the dangerous Ocean Palace, while Shala is forced to activate the Mammon machine, now close enough to Lavos to wake the slumbering beast. Masa and Mune communicate with them as they continue, telling them that the Mammon machine, Shala's pendant, and the red knife from Melchior are all made of dreamstone. As they continue through the relentless gauntlet, the dark energy from the Mammon machine begins affecting Shala, but Zeal maniacally demands that she continue so that they can achieve immortality. They eventually make it near the Mammon machine room, only to be stopped again by Dalton, who summons twin golem sisters to battle the group. What could have been a nightmarish fight is made laughably simple for the group thanks to a simple piece of technology developed by Lucca that puts the two to sleep, allowing the group to battle one of them at a time. Before Dalton can reveal his ace in the hole, however, he realizes that Lavos is awakening and decides to flee once again, stating that all of his hard work will be in vain if he dies before attaining immortality. The three proceed into the Mammon machine room, finding it running out of control as Shala is no longer able to maintain it. Crono rushes up and throws the red knife into the machine, with the machine's energy transforming the knife into a sword, the Masamune. The Masamune successfully disables the Mammon machine, but sadly, it's too late, as Lavos has already awoken. The three suddenly find themselves staring down the apocalyptic monster, and they draw their weapons. Despite their bravery, it's no use, and Lavos rains down destruction upon them. The mysterious prophet then steps up, exclaiming how long he's waited for this, and casts off his robe, revealing himself to be Magus. Magus states that he swore long ago that he'd destroy Lavos, no matter the price, and he prepares to battle the creature alone. He's interrupted by Zeal, who says that he'll be nothing more than grazings for the great Lavos. She proceeds to climb onto Lavos' shell, as Lavos drains away Magus' magical energy. Magus shrugs off the effect and charges at Lavos, striking it directly, to no effect. He's cast aside, as Lavos begins to draw in the entire group to consume them. Despite being beaten down, Crono manages to stand and grab his sword. He faces Lavos directly as the great monster fires a beam of energy towards him. What exactly happens next is not entirely clear, but Crono proceeds to be utterly obliterated in the process, and somehow his sacrifice allows the others to flee while Lavos heads to the surface. Afterwards, Magus laments that he lacked the power to defeat Lavos, while Marl and Lucca cry that Crono is gone. Shala uses the last of her power to send Marl, Lucca, and Magus back to the surface, where Lavos is busy devastating the kingdom of Zeal, sending the floating islands careening into the ocean. A massive tidal wave forms, wiping out the Earthbound One's village. Marl and Lucca wake up in a tent, where they are greeted by an elderly Earthbound One. The man tells them that they found no one else with them, but the Epoch washed up nearby, safe and sound, as if drawn to them. Left with nothing else to do but grieve for Crono and move on, Marl, Lucca, and Isla wander through the ramshackle village the survivors have set up. There are enlightened ones here that managed to survive the destruction of Zeal, but now there is no distinction between the two groups. While chatting, they are interrupted by the sudden arrival of Dalton, who seems to have fled the destruction entirely and managed to retain some of his forces. He declares that the kingdom of Zeal shall henceforth be known as the kingdom of Dalton, and he'll be taking the Epoch to make it his personal chariot. Dalton manages to incapacitate the three before they can even draw their weapons, and they wake up in a small, locked room together, with all of their items and equipment taken from them. Fortunately, Isla doesn't require any fancy weapons to beat up some villains, so she's prepared to break out. Their cell does feature a ladder that leads up to a balcony, revealing that they are in fact flying through the air on the Blackbird, the massive flying fortress designed by Balthazar for Zeal. Although this makes their escape a little trickier, they soldier on, discovering an entrance to some air vents in their cell. They begin moving through the ship, with Isla able to handily knock out some of Dalton's soldiers as they recover the others' items and equipment scattered about. They manage to spy on Dalton and some engineers working on the Epoch, with Dalton exclaiming that this will be his royal air throne. The three manage to make it out onto one of the ship's wings, where they are ambushed by yet another golem under Dalton's control, the Golem Overlord. Despite its menacing appearance and ominous countdown, the Overlord ends up being completely useless in the fight due to its crippling fear of heights. It ends up fleeing, much to the group's relief. That relief is short-lived, however, as they soon spot Dalton soaring through the skies nearby on the Epoch, newly equipped with some sleek wings. Dalton proclaims that this ship is now the Aero Dalton Imperial, and begins firing some laser cannons at the three. In an impressive show of dexterity, the three women leap onto the Aero Dalton Imperial and begin pummeling Dalton. Dalton, now overwhelmed, attempts to summon Golem Overlord, but rather than the monster appearing, Dalton is sucked into the vortex and disappears, relinquishing control of the Epoch. After some minor hiccups, they figure out how to pilot the ship, and proceed to blast the Blackbird, sending it crashing into the sea, much to the Earthbound one's delight. Lucca is a little saddened that Dalton upgraded the ship, as she had planned on doing it herself, but regardless, they now have access to a flying time machine. Before using it to depart this time period, they spot a familiar-looking man standing on the edge of a precipice on the far side of the island. Frog, Marl, and Lucca approach Magus, who tells them that he once lived in the kingdom of Zeal, but he was a different person then. He reveals what happened to Zeal and the Ocean Palace in the original timeline, before Crono and the group changed things and created this new timeline. When Zeal and Shala activated the Mammon machine in the Ocean Palace and awoke Lavos, a few gates formed, although the reason for this is not entirely clear. The three gurus were all whisked away to different time periods, along with Janus, who wandered into the chamber at the worst possible time. Balthazar ended up in 2300 AD, Melchior in 1000 AD, and Gaspar at the end of time, meaning that, as suspected, he's the old man that's been advising them. Janus, however, ended up in 600 AD, where he's immediately found by Ozzie and some fiends. Janus is Magus, and he's made it his life goal ever since then to slay Lavos, which is why he was so angry that they interfered when he summoned it. He finds it ironic that another time gate would appear and bring him back to this age, where he used his knowledge of the past to convince the queen that he was a prophet. Although he was able to face down Lavos as he always imagined he would, he couldn't imagine the power of the creature. As he puts it, before Lavos, all are as leaves cast to the bitter winds that howl about death's black wings. He tells them that if they stay on their course, their fate will be the same as Crono's, who he remarks was foolish and weak. At this, Frog draws his sword and tells Magus to stay his tongue. Magus is all too prepared to face off with Frog, but surprisingly, Frog sheathes his sword. He states that killing Magus will not restore either Crono or Cyrus's life. The three prepare to depart, but Magus stops them, saying that he would like to accompany them. He doesn't exactly state his reasons for doing so, other than wishing to see Lavos defeated as much as they do, but he tells them that Gaspar, the Guru of Time, knows of a way to restore those streams of time that have been diverted from their proper courses. The enemy of their enemy is their friend, and Magus is clearly no slouch in battle, so they welcome him aboard, with a wary eye. As they climb onto the Epoch, they see a massive structure rise out of the ocean. It's the Ocean Palace, but now it floats eerily in the sky as a foreboding Black Omen. Finding a way to bring back Crono takes priority, however, and the group returns to the end of time, where the old man asks after Crono. He's saddened by the news, but says that he only wishes that he could do more to help. Marl tells him that they're looking for the Guru of Time, as they heard that he knows of a way to bring Crono back. He says that they are not the first to wish to break death's hold over someone they hold dear, nor will they be the last. He gives them an egg, specifically a time egg, what he calls the Chrono Trigger. He tells them that the one who crafted their wings of time can tell them how to hatch it, but it may not necessarily hatch the results they desire. The Chrono Trigger represents potential, but as long as they keep Crono in their hearts and pursue what they seek, the results should follow, although he can't make any guarantees. Magus realizes at this point that this is Gaspar, the Guru of Time, to which Gaspar just laughs and says that that's what he was called long, long ago. Lucca, Marl, and Robo head back to 2300 AD and go back into Balthazar's lab, where they speak with a construct containing Balthazar's consciousness. He tells them that Death Peak harbors a power capable of restoring the slain to life. It's not easily invoked, as the need must be great, and the person's existence must be of the utmost importance. To carry this out, they'll need a double, a doll identical to that person in every detail. He suggests seeking out the magician, Norstein Beckler, who would be capable of whipping up a double in the wink of an eye, and tends to hang out around festivals. Beckler must be a curious individual indeed if Balthazar knows of him, since he went from 12,000 BC to 2300 AD. The group only knows of one big festival going on, and that's the Millennial Fair in 1000 AD. They travel back there hoping for the best. While traveling, they see the floating Ocean Palace in both 2300 AD and 1000 AD, meaning that it's simply been floating there for thousands and thousands of years, ominously waiting for them to take it on. First things first, however, and sure enough, they do end up finding Beckler at the fair, who set up his own large tent. Beckler is indeed quite curious, appearing only as a floating clown mask and hands, but says that he is willing to give them a doll of Crono, who he is somehow familiar with, as long as they participate in a game. The game ends up being a sort of mirroring game, where Lucca has to match the movements of a doppelganger of Crono. It seems like a rather morbid activity, but Lucca succeeds, and Beckler says that he'll send the doll over to Crono's house. While there, the group bumps into Crono's mother, who asks after him. Lucca lies and says that he's fine, and his mother simply says that she hopes that he's behaving himself. With the doll in hand, they return to Balthazar, who tells them that he has implanted one last memory in this construct's memory banks, one that will assist them as they traverse Death's Peak. With everything prepared, the three begin ascending the nearby Death Peak, an icy mountain of wind and despair. Balthazar's last program does prove useful, as without it, the three wouldn't be able to even make the initial ascent. Continuing up the mountain, they eventually come across a spiky monster, one that resembles Lavos and must clearly be one of its spawn. It turns out to be quite durable and deadly, but thankfully only contains a fraction of Lavos' power. Aside from that, Death Peak certainly lives up to its name, as the group battles various monsters, harsh winds, and more of Lavos' spawn, before finally reaching the peak. Marl takes the Chrono Trigger and begins to pray, asking for strength from those who fear the night and stand against the darkness. Shala's pendant then begins to glow, and the Chrono Trigger rises up into the air before shattering. With no Crono in sight, Marl begins to cry out in anguish at their failure. Suddenly, a solar eclipse occurs, and the three find themselves standing back in front of Lavos, in a moment frozen in time. Realizing that they need to exchange the doll of Crono with the real Crono before he sacrifices himself, they make the swap, and then find themselves back on the summit of Death Peak, but this time with Crono alive and well. Marl embraces him and tells him to never leave them like that again. Back at the end of time, Gaspar is glad to see Crono alive again, and says that there are multiple ways for them to battle Lavos if that's truly their ultimate goal. There's a bucket here at the end of time that for some reason is connected with Lavos and will take them to it, or they could simply take the Epoch to 1999 AD. There's also the Black Omen to deal with, the ocean palace floating in the sky, where Zeal still hopes to re-summon Lavos. Gaspar mentions that he has had vague glimpses of events, people, and places that will empower them and give them a better chance of defeating Lavos. A forest brought back to life by the sheer determination of a woman in the Middle Ages. The fortress of one of Magus's 3 former generals in the Middle Ages. A task to be done in the future in a birthplace of machines. A prehistoric stone that will shine with the light of all the ages of the world. The restless spirit of a proud knight slain by Magus in the Middle Ages, and lingering even in the present. And an object of legend in the Middle Ages that sparkles like a rainbow. He tells the group to borrow the might of all of these lives throughout the ages, and let their strength become their own, for only then can they hope to defeat Lavos. It sounds like the group has their work cut out for them if they want to truly be prepared for the final conflict. They decide to start with the prehistoric stone that Gaspar mentioned, as they recall a number of people in Zeal that remarked on a magical Sunstone that held the power of the sun, and was the source of Zeal's power before they moved on to utilizing Lavos' energy. The stone was held in a temple devoted to it, but unfortunately it sunk to the bottom of the ocean along with the rest of Zeal when Lavos attacked. The bottom of the ocean is a bit out of their reach, but thankfully, it seems to have risen out of the water for some reason by the year 2300 AD. Crono, Lucca, and Marl enter the temple, where they are quickly attacked by a floating eye wreathed in flames. The eye seems to be completely invulnerable to damage, and instead it seems to be testing the group to see if they're worthy of the stone. After playing its dangerous little game and succeeding, the eye transforms into a round stone. Lucca surmises that this is the Sunstone, but it's been drained of all of its energy. It could likely be recharged with sunlight, but it would take eons. Again, time travel comes in handy, and the group takes the stone back to 65 million BC, where they find a curious cave with a direct beam of sunlight into its interior. Marl remarks that this must be the sun's favorite place, and they leave the stone here. Minutes later, they're back in 2300 AD, where the cave still sits, and they head inside. Unfortunately, the stone is nowhere to be seen, meaning that someone must have taken it at some point. They head back to 600 AD, but the stone's still there, so they next travel to 1000 AD, and sure enough, the stone's gone. Hoping that whoever took it is still around, they roam the kingdom of Guardia looking for clues. As it turns out, they don't need many hints, as the house belonging to the mayor of Pore is giving off a vibrant light. The mayor, however, claims that he's never heard of any shining stone, while his family remarks on how greedy and selfish he is. Rather than simply pummeling the man and taking back what's theirs so that they can save the planet, they decide to try a different approach. They go back to 600 AD and meet with the man's ancestors, with one woman mentioning how much she'd like to have some spiced jerky to make a meal out of. The group manages to obtain some, for a rather high price, and take it back to the woman. She's willing to pay an equally high price for the jerky, but the group decides to give it to her for free, shocking the woman with their generosity. She tells them that she'll be teaching her children from their example. Flashing back to 1000 AD, they speak with the mayor again, who says that a passing young traveler left the stone here and they are more than welcome to take it. The man's family now exclaims about how much they like him, with his wife commenting that she wishes he was just a bit less generous. Sunstone back in hand and a good deed done, they return it to the cave and travel to 2300 AD. The stone now shines brilliantly, and Lucca says that with energy like this, she should be able to make a really powerful weapon. Back at the lab in her home, she converts the energy of the Sunstone into a more manageable form and vacuum packs it into a cartridge. With that done, she declares her new weapon to be the Wonder Shot, remarking that sometimes she amazes herself. Her father used some of the stone's energy to make a pair of sunglasses, which are both stylish and powerful. With shades in hand, it's time to move on, and the group next decides to tackle the reckless spirit of a knight slain by Magus. Crono and Frog decide to check it out, and they're joined by Magus, who is seemingly in the process of reforming himself. The three head to the Middle Ages, where they end up checking out a large area of ruins north of the village of Choras, on the southeastern continent. The ruins prove to be inhabited by a multitude of hostile spirits, and navigation becomes an issue due to numerous crumbling pits scattered about the structure. The group heads back to Choras and speaks with a carpenter to see about getting the ruins patched up to allow them to progress, but the carpenter complains that he can't work because someone took his tools. Rather than bother to try and track down his tools, the group simply hops into their time machine and heads to 1000 AD, where they speak with another carpenter and end up borrowing his tools. Back in the Middle Ages, the carpenter and his team take the borrowed tools and begin patching up the ruins. The three have to continually go ahead of the group to clear out the spirits before they can continue their work, but eventually it's fixed up enough for the group to make it to the ruins' back end. Here they find a single tombstone, and it turns out to belong to Cyrus, Frog's friend that was killed while facing down Magus. Frog stands in front of the grave and says that he has returned, and he will fulfill that oath he swore so long ago, and his final promise to him as well. He holds up the Masamune, and suddenly Cyrus's spirit appears, thanking Frog for making the journey here. He tells Frog that he was never as fine a warrior as Frog is now, and as he died, his heart burned with the thoughts of all he had left unfinished, and all he left behind. Now that he sees how Frog's skills have progressed, however, he can now rest peacefully, knowing that all will be made right by his hands. He begins to fade away, and with his parting words, he tells Frog to look after Queen Leene, and bids him farewell. Afterwards, the Masamune separates into Masa and Mune, and they say that all of Frog's emotional baggage was weighing him down, since the hero's strength is strength of will. Now that he's stopped dwelling on the past, the Masamune can now access his true strength. Before departing, Frog tells Cyrus that he goes now to follow in his footsteps and see done all that he had wished. Magus remains silent throughout the event, which is perhaps for the best considering the past. Speaking of Magus's past, since they're already in the Middle Ages, the group decides to head next to a new fortress that has been set up since Magus's disappearance. The fort belongs to one of his former generals, Ozzie, who now commands the legions of fiends that war with the humans. Arriving at the fort, Ozzie is shocked to see his former leader, but then lashes out at him in anger, claiming that he deserted his fellow fiends to lick the boots of filthy humans. Ozzie seems more hurt than angry though, confused as to why Magus would become a traitor to the fiends, which seems to imply that Magus never told him much about his youth. The group pursues Ozzie further into the fort, where Flea appears as well. Flea says that a human-loving traitor like Magus deserves to be punished, and a short battle ensues. It's clear that Flea is holding back though, as he runs farther into the fort. The group then bumps into Slash, who is also willing to attack his former lord. Similarly though, the battle ends quickly, and the group continues on. The real battle, however, occurs when Ozzie, Flea, and Slash surround the three and attack all together. This is certainly the most capable these three generals have ever been in a fight, but it's still not quite enough to beat Crono, Frog, and Magus. Slash and Flea are defeated, but Ozzie still manages to escape the battle alive and runs away yet again. Cornered, he pleads to Magus that they fought side by side before, and Magus had said that he wanted to create a world for fiends. Magus coldly replies that he sought power, nothing more. He asks if the howling of those bitter winds has escaped Ozzie's ears, and says that the end draws nigh. Ozzie falls back on his old technique of forming a protective barrier around himself, near some large switches on the wall. When the group hits one of the switches, a pit opens up beneath them instead, with Ozzie gloating that he got them. Sadly for him though, the fall is brief, and the group heads right back up to him again. While exclaiming that they'll never defeat him, however, a cat wanders in and hits another switch, opening a pit beneath Ozzie. Presumably this sends him somewhere far worse, as the group considers the matter closed. Magus says that the past is gone, and that it was but a fleeting dream. With the war between fiends and humans well and truly over, the group returns to 1000 AD and heads over to the village of Medina, which is inhabited by fiends. In contrast to their past behavior, the fiends here are now completely friendly and jovial around humans, so much so that a ferry is now being constructed to allow easy travel between Medina and Truce. Recalling Gaspar mentioning a forest being brought back to life by a woman in the Middle Ages, the group heads back to 600 AD and roams around, stumbling upon a massive sinkhole in the desert north of Pore. In the home nearby, a woman named Fiona mentions that anything she tries to plant dies before it has a chance to grow. She blames it on the monsters lurking underneath the desert nearby. She is in possession of a young tree that has been cultivated throughout the ages and is mysteriously resilient, that she believes could restore this desert to a verdant land. That tree, in fact, hails all the way back to the time of Zeal, when a woman approached the group and asked them about a sapling that she was given by Melchior. The sapling apparently has the power to restore the earth, and although the queen ordered her to burn it, the group convinced her to grow it in secret, where it eventually was passed down to her descendant, Fiona. Crono, Marl, and Robo decide to trek down into the sinkhole to clear the area of monsters. The monsters down there prove to be a hardy bunch, but eventually they stumble upon the real cause of the problem, a massive skeletal creature similar to Zombor, whom they fought back on the bridge. Thankfully, their past experience comes in handy, and they employ similar techniques to deal with this one. With the problem solved, they return to Fiona, who is glad to begin planting trees once again. She fears, however, that it will take ages to plant enough trees to reforest the land, and she wishes that there was someone who could work on the forest for centuries in order to turn the area green again. Robo immediately volunteers for the task, as he could remain here and work far longer than a human could, and the group can simply come pick him up in the future. The group agrees, and Robo begins working straight away, while the others hop back onto the Epoch and jump forward to 1000 AD. When they arrive, they find the area transformed, with much of the island covered in forests. It seems that Robo was able to bring Fiona's dream to life after all. Where her home used to be, there is now a grand shrine, inside of which they find Robo resting on a pedestal covered in rust. They reactivate him, and he is glad to see them, mentioning that for them only a few moments may have passed, but for him it's been 400 years. His efforts were worthwhile, however, with the forest restored. To celebrate the reunion, the group decides to camp out in the forest together. While Lucca works on cleaning and repairing him, Robo says that he's realized something over the last few hundred years. He believes that they are incorrect in their assumption that Lavos was responsible for creating the time gates. He has come to believe that another entity wished for them to witness certain events, or perhaps it wished to see these events for itself, almost as if it were reflecting on the days of its past. Frog says that before a man dies, he is made to bear witness a second time to those memories engraved most deeply upon his heart. There may be fond memories among them, but often as not, the ones which grieve us are the most profound. Robo goes on to say that knowing the end is approaching likely reactivates dormant feelings of regret and desire to return to moments in the past. Marl wonders if that same thing will happen to them when their time comes, and asks Lucca if there's a point in time she'd like to return to. Lucca hesitates, but says no, not really. Marl apologizes for asking, but Lucca says that it's okay, it's just something she doesn't like to think about too much. Back to the other topic, Frog says that even if Lavos did not open the gates, his fate is clearly bound to that of the one who did, as Lavos has played a role in every age they visited. Magus asks Robo who he thinks this entity is, but Robo doesn't know, only suspecting that it is an entity greater than any of them. Perhaps they won't know until their journey comes to an end. After the group falls asleep by the fire, Lucca wakes up alone and hears a sound coming from nearby. Upon investigating, she finds a gate, which she decides to enter by herself. The gate exits out into Lucca's home in the year 990 AD. She finds a diary entry written by her younger self, in which she shrugs off any interest in science, stating that girls don't need to know about that stuff. Downstairs, she finds a note written by her father, stating that the password to shut off his device is the name of his one true love. In the main room, she finds her younger self, along with her mother, and she realizes that this is the day of her mother's accident. One of Tabin's machines is running, and Lucca's mother decides to clean it when her skirt suddenly gets caught in the mechanisms. In the past, Lucca desperately tried to turn off the machine, but didn't know the password, resulting in the machine crippling her mother. Lucca is given a second chance here, however, and enters in the password, Lara, the name of her mother. The machine shuts down, and history has been altered. Upstairs, Lucca spends some time crying over what just happened before returning through the gate. She is greeted by Robo, who seems to know where she went, and says that was always weighing on her mind because she's always thinking of others. He then gifts her a piece of amber he created by taking some sap from the trees here and putting it under a great deal of pressure for the last 400 years. The group heads over to Lucca's house, where they find her mother walking again, mentioning what a beautiful day it is and how she's planning on going for a walk. It seems some good has come from this journey after all. With that done, and Robo reunited with the group, they decide to head back to the future to check out the birthplace of machines mentioned by Gaspar. On a small remote island, they find another factory known as Geno Dome. Upon entry, Robo says that he is familiar with this place, and he'll take the lead. After accessing a terminal, however, a voice asks who enters their sanctum unbidden, and then recognizes Robo, welcoming him home as R-66Y. They also refer to him as Prometheus, and says that he and the fleshlings behind him are welcome to come in, before opening the front door. After passing through, however, they're placed on a large conveyor belt, while the voice says that they'll see what capabilities the humans possess. What ensues is a veritable gauntlet of robotic foes, but the group continues to prevail. While progressing through the facility, the voice continues to taunt them. It says that 300 years ago, the Lavos disaster brought drastic and devastating change to this planet. At its current rate of decline, humanity is doomed, and the disease they call despair is already consuming them from within. After progressing further in, they eventually come across another set of conveyor belts, this one moving unconscious humans into a machine that seems to kill them and convert them into some other type of material. It becomes apparent then that Geno is really short for genocide, as the robots here have completely turned against humanity and are slaughtering the ones that remain. The group tries to shut down the system, but Robo states that there's too many layers of protection and they'll have to disable the mother brain mainframe first. Determined to do exactly that, the three continue through the facility, battling killer robots and overcoming various security measures, until they are stopped by another robot similar in appearance to Robo, who greets him as Prometheus. Robo recognizes her as Atropos, a reference to one of the three fates of Greek mythology, the goddesses who presided over mortals' fates and ultimately cut off their threads of life. Atropos says that there's no need for him to keep pretending that he's on the human side. She explains that Prometheus was given a special task among their kind, to live among humans and study them as a species. She bids him to join her in eliminating these humans, and then they can go see Mother. Robo, however, refuses to let her harm them, and so, since she believes him to be damaged through human tampering, she'll have to destroy them by herself, and then fix Robo. Robo, however, says that Atropos is not the same robot he knew before, and she says that she has been upgraded by Mother to make her more capable in eliminating humans. Robo tells Crono and Lucca to stand aside, as he faces down Atropos alone. Fortunately, Robo has also grown stronger in his time with the others, and though Atropos is a capable opponent, he emerges victorious. The fight seemed to have knocked something loose in Atropos, as she now seems to recognize Robo for the first time, and asks what happened to her. Her old memories, which were supposed to have been wiped out by Mother, have been restored, but unfortunately her core systems are now failing due to damage. Before failing completely, she gifts Robo her computerized ribbon, and tells him goodbye. All that remains now is to face off the reason for all of this genocide, the Mother Brain. Upon approach to her chamber, she tells the group that one day, Lavos' children will return to the stars to seek out new planets and new sources of sustenance. When that day comes, this planet will have its chance to heal, so long as there are no humans to interfere. The robots will establish a new world order, a unified nation of steel and pure logic, a utopia free of sadness and suffering. Evolution has chosen them to be the seeds of the next generation. Obviously, the three aren't going to accept that, so they enter into her chamber, where a number of panels emit a holographic image of a female form into the center of the room. Mother Brain introduces herself, and then tells Robo that she'll restore his logic and reset his circuitry. Then they can dispose of these filthy humans together. Robo, however, says that he cannot permit her to do that, as his memories are too valuable to be deallocated, and so are his friends. Mother Brain asks if he'll betray her and all of robot kind in order to side with the humans, to which Robo responds that he has learned a great deal from humans, and he wants to see the future that they bring about. This only causes Mother Brain to break out in laughter, saying that there is no future for the humans. Of course, a fight begins, and despite the group quickly destroying the three displays projecting the hologram, Mother Brain herself remains, suggesting it to be possibly some sort of hard light. Regardless, the group continues to attack the manifestation itself, throwing everything they've got at it. Eventually, it dissipates, and Robo uses the nearby terminal to completely disable the entire facility. With that, the potential reign of robots in the future is put to a close. That finished, the group decides to return to the present, with Marl finally deciding to return back to her home, Guardia Castle. Unfortunately, upon arrival, she immediately gets into a shouting match with her father after he insults the others in the group. He says that she's a daughter of the line of Guardia, and consorting with their like is a disgrace to this family's name. Marl says that this only confirms what she suspected, that he cares more about the kingdom than he ever did about her or her mother. She then accuses him of killing her mother, which outrages him, resulting in him banishing her from the castle and disowning her. Sensing that it's best not to stick around the castle for long, the group departs, recalling something that a fellow adventurer asked them to do back in the Middle Ages. The adventurer, Toma, had been in pursuit of a legendary fossil known as the Rainbow Shell, supposedly capable of being forged into some incredibly powerful pieces of equipment. Despite being close to finding it, he confided in Crono that he can't shake the feeling that things will go sour and his luck may finally run out. He had given Crono a bottle of alcohol and asked him to pour it over his gravestone if anything bad should befall him. Toma didn't end up being killed in any sort of horrible expedition, but the group decides to pour the spirits out anyway over his gravestone in 1000 AD. Upon doing so, Toma's spirit appears, which would normally be pretty surprising, but the group is accustomed to odd occurrences by this point. Toma's spirit immediately reveals that he managed to actually find the Rainbow Shell on an island nearby called the Giant's Claw. There are droves of monsters in the caves there, however, and he couldn't manage to retrieve the shell himself. With that, he departs, and the group takes the Epoch back to 600 AD and over to the island to begin exploring its caves. Shortly after entering the caves, however, they stumble into a familiar-looking structure, the Reptite lair. Rather than being completely destroyed when Lavos fell, parts of it were merely pushed underground and managed to stick around for millions of years. Crono, Marl, and Frog progress through the area, passing through sections of both castle and cave, battling prehistoric monsters that have somehow remained isolated to this island all this time. Eventually, they run into a familiar-looking foe, the Tyranno, that is somehow still alive despite being fossilized. The Tyranno puts up even more of a fight than it did 65 million years ago, but once again, the group prevails. Behind the Tyranno, they find the fabled Rainbow Shell, shimmering in the light. It proves to be far too heavy for the three of them to lift, so they decide to enlist the help of Guardia, whom the group still has good relations with in this time period. King Guardia agrees to help bring the Rainbow Shell to his castle and safeguard it, as they'll need Melchior's help in the present time to forge it into equipment for them. The group returns to the present, where they now have to deal with the current King Guardia in order to retrieve the shell. Surprisingly though, upon entry to the castle, they're informed that the interior of the castle has been sealed off by order of the Chancellor until the trial is over. Further questioning reveals that the trial is centered on King Guardia himself, accused of selling off a royal heirloom, none other than the Rainbow Shell. The group barges into the courtroom, where the Chancellor is currently questioning the king. He's holding an ancestral will, written by the past King Guardia, in which he states that the Rainbow Shell is to be shown off at the Millennial Fair in the year 1000. The current king has no idea what the Chancellor is talking about, however, stating that there are no ancient royal heirlooms here. The Chancellor, in turn, claims that the king denies the shell's existence because he no longer owns it, instead selling it off for no reason other than his own greed. Upon Marl's entry, the king tells her that the Chancellor is trying to frame him, to which the Chancellor says that all he needs to clear his name is for them to bring in proof that the shell remains in the castle. It's fairly clear to them that the Chancellor is up to no good, but they're kicked out of the courtroom. Fortunately, the shell should be somewhere in the castle, provided that the Chancellor hasn't done anything with it. The three progress to the castle's basement, where they overhear some fiends mention that their boss is finally going to settle his 13-generation-old family grudge by framing the king with fake evidence. They beat down the fiends in a haste and hurry along, while upstairs in the courtroom, the Chancellor brings in a false witness to proclaim that he bought the shell from the king, who looked desperate for money. Finally, in the back of the basement, they find the rainbow shell, attached to which is a note written by Queen Leene. The note is written to Marl, in which Leene tells her that even though things aren't easy with her father right now, she'll always be his daughter. Nothing can break the bonds of blood, neither distance nor words of anger. Someday she'll leave the nest and have children of her own, and then she'll understand the truth of what she says. Blood is the sap that flows through the limbs of a family tree, and come what may in future days, they'll be forever joined by that. With time of the essence, they break off a shard of the rainbow shell and hurry back upstairs, where the jury is currently proclaiming the king guilty. The guards at the front of the court will not budge to let them enter, so Marl leads the group around to a separate entrance. The separate entrance turns out to be behind the massive stained glass window, and just as the guards are about to haul off the king, Marl bursts out of the window into the courtroom. She declares the entire situation to be a setup, and shows off the shard from the shell. Sensing that the game is up, the Chancellor states that if he can't avenge his ancestors the easy way, he'll do so the hard way, and transforms into a creature similar to Yakra, the one that kidnapped Queen Leene. The three battle the transformed Chancellor in the middle of the courtroom, and they prove to be more than a match for him, striking him down just like his ancestor. In the aftermath, Marl speaks with her father, who says that he was wrong to be so stubborn. He says that there was a time when he truly thought she was lost to him, but now he realizes that it was him who abandoned her. She says that from now on, she'll come to him to ask for advice, and talk about things like Crono and her mother. The king says that it's taken him until now to understand what her mother meant with her final words, in which she said that someday when Marl is older, she'll bring someone she loves to meet him, and he should welcome the two of them with open arms. She said that that would make it a day he would remember forever. Marl was only a small child when her mother died, so she doesn't remember it, but she apologizes to her father for everything. With that done, Melchior is brought in to discuss the rainbow shell, and the real Chancellor is found locked up in a chest within the castle. Melchior uses the shell to make a single dress, incredibly powerful and resistant to all forms of magic. He also uses the shell combined with the power from the Sunstone to make them some powerful spectacles, and an incredibly unique and exceptional sword for Crono. With that all done, the group has everything they need to finally tackle the Black Omen that has been hanging in the sky for thousands of years, and put a stop to Queen Zeal once and for all. Crono, Frog, and Magus fly the Epoch back to 12,000 BC, where this all started, and land on the edge of the Black Omen. Upon entry, they are greeted by Zeal, who asks them if they have not learned their lesson yet. She has been made immortal, and she shall live forever with Lavos, who feasts upon this planet from within. In a mere 14,000 years, he will emerge to rain destruction upon the earth and crown himself its king. The Black Omen is the path which leads to Lavos. It is the conduit through which her limitless power flows, and as long as the almighty Lavos reigns, their dreams are all for naught. With that, she departs, leaving behind an abomination to battle the group. After defeating it, the three begin trekking through the massive structure, which turns out to be filled with the most dangerous creatures they've had to face so far, empowered by Lavos' energy. Between Crono and Frog's sword abilities and Magus' mastery of magic, however, they manage to progress. After what seems like a never-ending tide of monsters across multiple floors of the gigantic floating complex, they finally come across Zeal again. She's standing in a chamber where other versions of the group stand floating in pillars of light. Upon approaching her, she says that it is their futures that slumber in this hall, destiny in its essential form. All their dreams that might have been, all the happiness and sorrow they might have known, their tomorrow as it has been witnessed. She explains that the Black Omen transcends time and space, drifting through the all and nothing, waiting for Lavos to awaken. Destiny has led them here, and here they shall remain, unless they can defeat her and bring down the Omen. The three surround the Queen and begin battle, in which she proves to be no slouch, wielding a portion of Lavos' power and utilizing it to dish out devastating magical attacks that bring the group to their knees. Before long, however, she withdraws and claims that her powers are not functioning properly here, so instead she'll feed them to the Mammon machine. The three are then forced into a battle against the machine itself, which manages to absorb their attacks, both physical and magical, in order to strengthen itself. Fortunately, Frog's Masamune is capable of siphoning some of this energy off, and eventually they defeat the machine. Afterwards, the three find themselves at the top of the Black Omen, facing Zeal once again. She states that she is the queen that shall rule for all eternity at Lavos' side, but Magus tells her that no thing, no life, can last forever. He says that she is deceived, and hers is a pitiable plight deserving of mercy, so he'll put an end to all of this. The Queen, of course, does not recognize her son, instead only remembering him as the prophet, and she transforms into a massive head and disembodied hands. The heroes draw their weapons and begin battle with Queen Zeal for the final time. Due to her unique relationship with Lavos and the massive amounts of power that she's drawn from him, she's capable of unleashing truly devastating magical attacks, effortlessly bringing the three to near death. It's a struggle for survival, but the three stand fast, eventually bringing down the head, causing Zeal to revert to her normal form. In her fury at being beaten, she calls out to Lavos, asking him to lend her more of his power. In doing so, she actually awakens Lavos fully, and Crono, Frog, and Magus have no choice but to face off against the alien monstrosity once again. Curiously, Frog's words about Lavos being inextricably connected to all of the time periods they visited rings true, as Lavos begins mimicking the attack patterns of some of the group's greater foes. It mimics the Dragon Tank, the Guardian Robot from 2300 AD, Hecarim, Zombor, Masamune, Nizbel, Magus, Azala and the Tyranno, and the monster on top of the Mountain of Woe. It's a gauntlet, to be sure, but the three are aided by their past experiences and the knowledge gained from fighting these foes before. After battling through all of these mimicked forms, they manage to destroy what seems to be Lavos' head, leaving behind only a gaping hole in its shell. Magus declares that the end is yet far, and he yells that he will sever the wick of Lavos' life's candle before charging into the shell. Inside, the group lands in a cavernous passageway, with the sound of a dreadful heart beating in front of them. There is fortunately a gate here as well, and so the three decide to take it back to the end of time to give them a chance to regroup. Only 3 of them can go to face off with Lavos, and so Crono decides to take along the 2 individuals that he started his journey through time with, Marl and Lucca. Together, As fully prepared as they can be, they activate the ominous bucket in the corner of the End of Time and are taken straight to 1999 during the Day of Lavos. Fortunately, the damage that they had already done to Lavos hasn't changed, and they're able to enter back into his shell. They progress down the passageway towards the sounds coming from deep within Lavos, eventually reaching what appears to be Lavos' actual body, the thing protected by the outer shell. The creature says nothing to them, as it either can't speak or has nothing to say, and so the three draw their weapons. No more mimicking other lesser foes. Instead, Lavos reveals his true might, releasing devastating blasts of energy while also sustaining himself. The group is forced to first deal with the creature's two arms, which support the rest of the body, before working on hacking apart the rest of Lavos. It's still far from defenseless without its arms, blasting the group with everything from laser beams to great blazing infernos. The three heroes persevere, however, and soon Lavos' body disappears in a flash of light, leaving behind a smaller, humanoid-looking alien. Lucca says that she now understands. As Lavos lives on a planet for as long as possible, selecting the most desirable life forms and allowing them to advance so that it can harvest their DNA. It then gives birth to its spawn, which contain that DNA, and eventually they'll migrate to other planets and repeat the cycle. In other words, Lavos has influenced human development for millions of years, specifically for them to advance, and then be harvested for their prime DNA, before its spawn repeat the process across the galaxy. It is a parasite of the highest order, and they're determined to eliminate it. The creature engages them again, and it's clear now that they were wrong before, as this is its true form, the core of Lavos. It's joined by two floating pods that work to support it, but the group focuses on the humanoid alien. This proves to be a mistake, as Lavos predicted the way humans would think in battle. It turns out that Lavos' core is actually contained inside one of the pods, and it can regenerate the other two forms again and again. This is the greatest foe they would ever face, as Lavos has lived for countless eons and absorbed an untold amount of other peoples and civilizations. It possesses the might of the cosmos, but the heroes do not falter in their goal. They unleash their most powerful abilities, demonstrating true mastery over magic and combat, and eventually they prove that their force of will is stronger than that of Lavos. The core is destroyed, and Lavos emits one last scream as it dies. Visions of multiple locations across multiple time periods flash before their eyes, and then they slip into unconsciousness. Crono awakens in his bed at home, but this time he's been awoken by a soldier of Guardia. He is informed that his stay of execution has been withdrawn, and he will come to the castle to have his sentence carried out. He is brought before the king, and asked where he took the princess. Marl then rushes in, exclaiming that Crono hasn't done a thing. The king then turns to the chancellor, who says that Marl is quite clearly delusional, as Crono's deeds have impacted the entire kingdom. Marl begins to yell and argue, but the king reveals that he knows that they have saved the future. Doan then appears from the year 2300 and says that they saved the future and taught them what it is to have hope. The King Guardia from 600 AD also appears and says that they defeated Magus' troops and restored peace to the Middle Ages. Geno then walks in and states that Crono beat the Reptites as well. Finally, Lucca walks out from behind the throne, and Marl realizes that she brought them all here to celebrate. All of these individuals are past and future members of the Guardia line, and they informed the king about what the group has done. They have arranged for a victory parade to celebrate Crono and the others for saving the world. Crono and Marl head off to the Moonlight Parade held at the fairgrounds, where a great celebration is going on. They spot Lucca's parents, with her mother bugging her father to dance, and they speak with Crono's mom, who wishes that Crono would spend a little more time around the house. They speak with Melchior, who says that his days as a smithy may very well be behind him now, but looking up at the beautiful sky, it's hard to be worried about something like that. After enjoying the dancing and the merriment, Crono and Marl proceed to the back of the fairgrounds, where they find all of their companions. With the celebrations coming to a close, it's time for the others to return to their respective time periods. The gates are growing weaker now that Lavos is gone, and soon they will cease to exist at all. Isla and Kino leave first, with Marl telling Kino that, as her ancestor, he'd better have strong, healthy kids, or she'll be in trouble. Kino tells her not to worry, however, as Isla has a lot of energy, which confuses Marl and angers Isla, who drags Kino into the gate. Next, Frog and King Guardia the 21st depart, as Frog says that he's always felt farewells were best kept brief. Marl then kisses Frog on the cheek, with Lucca chuckling that you know it's a happy ending when the princess kisses the frog. Embarrassed, Frog leaves through the gate, and is soon followed by Magus, who plans on searching for Shala, although he leaves without saying a word. Finally, Robo and Doen prepare to return to the future, as Robo assures Lucca that he will continue to work hard. Lucca stays quiet, however, and Robo realizes that she knows that the future Robo originally came from has been changed, as the world will not be destroyed by Lavos. This means that Robo may not exist in such a drastically changed timeline. Robo only laughs, however, and says that the new future will certainly have a place for him. Lucca begins punching Robo, yelling that he shouldn't pretend he doesn't care when he's really sad, as it just makes things worse. Robo tells her that she is the one who taught him to consider the feelings of others in that manner, and he's grateful for that. With that, he wishes her and the others goodbye, and he departs. As Crono, Marl, and Lucca stand there in front of the gate, Lucca brings up their conversation about the entity and its life flashing before its eyes. She gets the feeling that that entity is finally at rest now as well. Marl then mentions how easy it is to mess things up with time travel, so Lucca says that she should probably dismantle the Epoch, even though it would mean never seeing their friends ever again. Just then, however, Crono's pet cat runs in, chased by Crono's mother. She chastises Crono, saying that pets run away when you don't feed them, but then the cat runs into the gate. Crono's mom chases after it, and the gate closes shut before Crono can stop her. Fortunately, they still have a time machine. Before they can run off, Marl's father calls them over and says that he's happy she no longer has a reason to run off now, and he has a gift for her to commemorate this day. He brings in a new bell for the fairgrounds, dubbed Nadia's Bell. But as he goes to move it into place, Marl thanks him for the gift, but says that she has places to be. Tabin begins firing off a slew of fireworks as the three climb into the Epoch and take off. Sometime later, Crono ends up marrying Marl in a grand ceremony, and Isla ends up marrying Kino back in prehistory. In the Middle Ages, Frog, now reverted back to Glen, is knighted by King Guardia, an honor that his old friend Cyrus would have loved to have seen. Meanwhile, Lucca has begun tinkering with robotics and has created a miniature robot in a similar form to Robo. While out for a walk in the woods, she stumbles upon a baby draped in a pendant. But that's a story for another time. With that, the story of Chrono Trigger comes to a close. It's a story of good triumphing over an evil force. But unlike many RPGs of the time, whose villains are maniacal individuals that want to rule the world, Lavos is nothing more than a parasite, a cosmic horror that is utterly alien and is only interested in draining the planet before moving on. It's also a story of time travel, and while the scope of the time travel is limited to only 5 different time periods and the end of time, it still manages to feel epic. The game also features a relatively small roster of only 6 or 7 playable characters, but all of them are exceptionally memorable, and a bloated cast would not have aided the story. It's no surprise that Chrono Trigger is often hailed as one of the greatest games ever made, but what is perhaps surprising is the lack of a direct sequel. Instead, we were given Chrono Cross, an exceptional game in its own right, but one that features none of the characters from Trigger as playable characters. Regardless, Chrono Trigger stands alone as an incredible piece of 16-bit storytelling, one that clearly stands the test of time.